Hi, this is Diane again. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get started on using the project that we downloaded onto our USB drive. So I embroidered it out and I followed the directions as well. So what I did, I printed out a copy of the directions on how to assemble and how to embroider and then how to assemble as well. So it's like, please print that out, or some people would prefer not to print it out, which is the case too, which will work. So I mean, if you're relying on your iPad or your computer to view those directions, go ahead, make sure you read through them and then follow those directions, and then you will be on your way to create this centerpiece that we're showing here. So I embroidered that out, stitched it all together. Here's just a sample of how one of them will look, you know, in its individual stage, you know. And then of course you're going to create 7 of these to put it together and to form that centerpiece. Okay, now what I did with it, I took it a little bit further in order to utilize some of the wonderful features that I have on the machine itself. I went into the IQ Designer here and I created this little mat that I wanted to utilize and place underneath the centerpiece. And I made it reversible as well. So you can see here is the orange fabric that was utilized, and then on the reverse side I used the green fabrics. And so it's like whatever you choose to do. You can make it reversible or non-reversible. That's kind of your choice. But for this project I made it reversible. That way I could showcase the different fabrics, and it adds a little bit more color as well to the centerpiece. So right now I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to show you what I utilized and how I created this little center, we'll call it a candle mat. So anyway, I'm going to open it up, or turn on the machine, open it up into here. I'm just going to take you to the back to this again, to the opening screen on the Solaris Vision machine. And I'm clicking on the IQ Designer. In the IQ Designer, this is where you can create different features or different backgrounds or whatever it might be that you so choose to use this IQ Designer for. There's a lot of different possibilities that you could definitely utilize in here. So at this state, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into this particular category, which is your shapes category. If I know the size of the shape that I want, I will always pick the size hoop that I'm going to work with. Okay, up on the top level, up here, I'm going to choose the 240 by 240 hoop. As you can see, my hoops are in inches rather than in metric sizes. So if I choose to change that into, I'm going to cancel out of here, and we're going to come up here to this category up there, into my properties field. And in here, you know, I've got the opportunity to put, you know, my hoop in here as well, grid, the speed, and so forth. So go ahead and set your machine up as to your likings at this point. So if you would prefer to do your frame up here, you could definitely do that, but I'm going to choose it in the IQ Designer. I'm going to go ahead and come up here to the units. Under the units, it's under inches. I'm going to go ahead and say I want to do that in millimeters. I'm going to close out of it. Now when I open this field and I open up my hoop options right up here, they are all listed in millimeters rather than the inches. That way, and if you look on your hoop as well, the size of the hoop will be shown. See this? It's going to be written down into this area on your hoop itself. So this is the 9.5 by 9.5, or the 240 by 240. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and select that, say OK to it. So now this red line that's going around there, around the screen, that's the hoop size that I'm going to stay within. Now I'm going to go back into that field, and I'm going to choose a square. Now this is the area where the design will embroider within. So I'm going to say OK to it. I'm going to come over here and click on size. Right in this field right there, it shows the size in millimeters. And so we're going to make it larger. We're going to make it a little smaller than the 240 by 240 size. And so, so what we're going to do is we're going to increase it at this point because the inside is the size where the design will fill up. You can long hold and it'll move it a little faster as I'm doing right now. So you can do that until you get to about, I'm going to say 236 by 0.4, and that's a square. So it's going to fill up that hoop very nicely. I'm going to go ahead and say that's what I want. Okay. So I'm going to say okay to this. Got out of that field, and now we're back into our main portion of the IQ design. In this portion, what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and we're going to select the different fill that we want to utilize for this project. We have options of doing stippling. In this third category right here, that's going to take us into those fills that I'm going to select one of the fills in this field right here. So I'm going to say select. And when we get in here, it shows you all the different fills that are part of that machine, or this machine here. I'm going to kind of scroll down here until I get to the fill that I want to utilize. Let's see. I'm going to go back up a little bit. And it's a circular one. Oh, did I? Right here it is. There's 036. That's the number we're going to utilize. Now in this, since we're doing or going to create a round or a candle mat, I thought that this would be a good one to give me an indication and to create a circular pattern. That way around those circles I can utilize that to cut out the circle. That way I don't have to try to get a piece of equipment that's going to create circles for me. I'm going to utilize that particular shape right here to create that circle. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is the one, 036, click OK to it. Now I also can change the color on the screen. What this is doing is it's changing the color so it visually shows up. Granted, you know, when you're doing this, you can thread your machine whatever color you so choose. Okay, so I'm going to be using an orange on the first sew out. So I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to change it to a blue so that we can see it, and it'll show up on this video really nicely. So I'm going to say OK to it. Now I'm going to fill the area with that color. So I'm going to go ahead and click in here, and it fills that area that or that shape and also the hoop with that particular design fill. Okay, at this point I'm pretty much set and ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and say next to this. In this next field is where I can customize that shape. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to utilize these arrows that are going from either direction, left or right. This is an arrow right there that's going to do a stitch around it. So if I were to do, a satin stitch, or if I wanted to do a satin stitch around it, I could definitely use a satin stitch around it. I'm not going to use the satin stitch feature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go click on that, and I'm going to decide I'm going to use it more as a basting style of a stitch. So this is a satin, this is the double, this is the triple, and then you can also put different motifs around it. But we're not going that route today. Okay, for this project, what I want to do is I'm going to select the double stitch. It's right there, and I'm going to utilize that double stitch as a basting stitch around my project. So I'm going to say OK to it, and it's recalculating. And so as you could see before, when we had this open, it showed a satin stitch going around. Now it shows that double stitch. It's like that red line that's going around that particular fill. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to continue on with this. So I'm going to set that. Oops, I went too far. If I wanted to, I could take it back to the original portion of the screen, but I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to come over here, back into this field right here to customize my fill. I want to make sure that that fill is large enough so that we have this kind of a stitch, so it's a little bit larger than what it is now. So we have the option of resizing that fill right now before we take it to the embroidery side of the machine. So right up in here is where I'm going to be. So right here it's at 100%. I'm going to increase that. So if I do a long hold, it'll increase a little faster, or I could do it step by step, whatever it might be, and it'll take it all the way up to 200%, that size of that fill. Well, 200 I felt was a little too large, and that's based upon me using the 5x7 size from the Sweet Pea. So I'm going to take it down. I'm going to go down to approximately 160%. I'm happy with that. I'm going to say okay with it. Now you can see how it increased the size of that pattern. Before it was, it was smaller size, and so it created a design that was smaller in nature rather than the one that we need. So you could see the rings going around it, right around there. So we want to use those rings as our template for cutting it out, and you'll see what I'm talking about when we get into that side. I'm going to go and set this because I'm okay with size. Now we come to convert to the embroidery pattern, and to IQ Designer will be exited. Okay to continue. So you can read all this as well, and it's very intuitive, this machine. So it tells you exactly what to do and when to do it. And you're verifying it by clicking OK. Now what it did is it brought us up into the embroidery side of the machine. So in this situation, I'm going to go and hoop my stabilizer in the hoop, which I've already done. I've hooped my stabilizer, and the stabilizer that I'm using here for this project, Fuse and Fleece Stabilizer. This has a sticky side on it here. It's not sticky until you fuse it. But so what I did with this, I hooped it, cut the size of the stabilizer a little bit larger than my hoop. Hoop that only. I made sure that the fusible side was facing up because I'm going to fuse this after I embroider it. Now some of you are thinking, well, why didn't you fuse it before? Well, I could have done that, but my fabric piece that I had left, so I bought a specific size of fabric. This is the size that's left. I couldn't get that in my hoop. So because when you're hooping, you want to make sure that your fabric, your stabilizer is all into the sides here of the hoop. This fabric wasn't large enough. So you can use smaller pieces of fabric to do this with. And that's why I said earlier that that outer stitch going around it, that's going to be what I'm going to use as my baseline to hold the fabric down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say embroider. Now put the hoop onto the machine itself, clicking it into position, into place. Carriage will move. Click OK. Now at this point in time, I want to lay my fabric and lay this in the center of the hoop as such. I'm going to just make sure it's nice and smooth. It's laid into the center. And what I'm going to do, rather than stitching the pattern itself first, I'm going to come down and I'm going to stitch the second portion of that design first, which is that double stitching line that I was talking about, why I changed it from a satin to a double stitch. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, here, under this category, I'm going to scroll down to get to that second stitch. Threaded the machine, I should say. What I'm going to do is go ahead and say okay to this. I want that to stitch first. So that's the second portion of this design, just to be very clear about that. You can tell up here on your scroll bar that's going across, it's taking it all the way over to the start of that second area of the design, which is that double stitch. We'll come back and stitch this a little bit later after we have stitched out that basting stitch that's going around the machine. So I'm going to say okay to it. I'm going to embroider, and then here's where I want to choose that second row, click OK to it, and then I'm going to lower my presser foot, get a green light, and I'm going to go ahead and press the start button. When it turns green on the machine, that means it's ready to go. So as I go along or around this design, machine is going at a slower pace, so that just in case I need to adjust the fabric for any reason, maybe you've got a kink in it or whatever it might be, you know. Oh, it's getting close to the edge, and that's okay, because we're going to be cutting away some of this. This stitch here is basically holding down the fabric so that it doesn't shift during the embroidery of that design in the middle. See how that's going around, and it's doing pretty good. And what happens now, we slowed it down to go around the outer edge, okay? But if you choose to speed it up a little bit, you can definitely speed up. Right now it's at 350 stitches per minute. We can increase that up, okay? Since it's pretty well set here, we're going to go ahead and increase this up to about 900. We'll be fine with that for the time being. And go ahead and press the start button. It's speeding it up, and we know that the fabric is secured in the hoop, so it'll go ahead and it'll stitch that second row of stitches, which is right on top of the first. Okay. Almost to the end of that particular thread chain. Now what we need to do is we need to get back to the original, so it's right there, and it's going to tell us that it's completed. Well, we're not done yet. We're going to go ahead and say okay to that. We want the center stitch to stitch now. We're going to use the same thread color, and it's going to stitch that one. So lower your presser foot and go ahead and start the action. In this situation, what I'm also going to do, we had it at 900 stitches per minute. We're going to take it up to 1,050 stitches per minute. Say okay to it, start the machine, and it will complete. Now what we're going to do with this, we're going to stitch out one section for the orange with the orange thread as well, and then we're going to do the second piece using blue thread. Okay, so we're going to let this embroider out, and then I'll come back and I will change threads. I could stop this, cut the thread, because I don't need it all embroidered. Okay, so what I did is I hooped another piece of stabilizer and placed my coordinating fabric on top. And I also switched then, like we did with the first one, I stitched to the second thread color so that it faces it down. Say okay to it, lower your presser foot, and go ahead and start the machine. And here again, you could slow your machine up if you so choose. I'm going to just let it go at full speed right now. The fabric is laying nice and flat, so I don't have any concerns about it kinking or wrinkling. And I did change thread colors as well, so I put in a navy blue thread because of that contrast. It's a good contrast on it. And it's doing its second pass for that double stitch that we had selected. And of course, we're using the same pattern that we used on the first sew out. I just want you all to know there's other fills that you can also utilize from Baby Lock. This particular fill that we used was one that was built in. So if you get into the holidays or whatever, they've got different holiday fills. I think they have a couple more of these design suites that you can utilize. So it gives you a nice library of designs, you know, that you can utilize. So we're going back to the first one. Now we're going to go embroidery again, and we're going to lower our presser foot and stitch it out. But so you might want to check with Larry or Annette for any additional fills that come for the Solaris machine as well. Okay. So we're going to let this sew out, and then we'll be back to show you how you cut out the pattern or that circle shape and how you sew it together. Okay, so I'll be back in a little bit after that. Here we're all completed with our second, with our contrasting fabric. So I'm going to just remove this from the hoop. You can see how pretty that looks. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use these circles, this blue stitched circle shape right here. And we're going to cut around that, leaving like a 1/4 of an inch on the outer edge, you know, for the seam line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, and that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to just stab this. The outer section, I don't need it any longer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to maintain like a 1/4 of an inch all the way around. And it's kind of easy to maintain that when you're cutting in the hoop like this, because it's nice and taut, you know. And so I'm just going to cut around there. And it doesn't really matter how accurate it is at this point in time, because you're going to be sewing it to that orange section, and you're going to do the same thing to the orange piece that we first embroidered out. Okay, now the rest of this is pretty much trash, and so I'm going to go ahead and save my fabric, because use it for another project. So set that aside, and this portion, I'm going to just unhoop it. And I mean, if you want to save it, it's up to you if you have another use for it, but I'm going to go ahead and say nope, it's pretty much trash for my mindset, so I threw that away. And here's the original that I stitched out, so I'm going to do the same thing with it. Find that outer circle. That's right, and it's a little harder to see on this because it was tone on tone. So I'm going to just go ahead and cut that out. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is press them both really good. Okay, press them flat. And now we're going to take this back, set my hoop aside. Okay. You're going to switch out your presser foot as well. But I'm going to take this back to home, say okay to it. And I'm going to go to sewing. Click OK to it. Once you remove your embroidery foot with your standard presser foot, you're going to go ahead and choose your stitch position, whichever it might be. And I'm going to decrease this down my stitch length to 2.0. Put right sides together. Your right sides together. They may be a little different shape, but you're going to know that. Take your smallest one and use it as your sample. You might want to pin it together as well. And so setting it up with your 2.0 stitch length, you're going to pin these together, and then you're going to stitch around it and 1/4 of an inch from the edge. But what you're really going to do is you're going to follow that line, that stitch line, from the embroidery. Right there it is, all the way around. You can see that. You're going to stitch on top of that line, and you're going to leave approximately, I would say maybe three inches or so, something like that, open. So don't stitch all the way around. Stop and leave about a 3-inch opening for turning. Then once you stop at that point, do a back stitch to secure those stitches so that they don't pull out. And then you're going to turn it right side out, as such. And granted, I'm just emulating it right now, and then you're going to press it flat, and then you're going to end up with a piece that looks similar to this. And then top stitching it as well. Top stitch about, 1/4 of an inch around the outer edge to secure it. And if you need to glue, and what I did is with right up in here, I glued that down so that that wouldn't come loose as well. Just tack that down or glue it down to hold it in place. You're complete with your little candle holder, or your candle mat, I should say, as such, underneath. And you don't have to attach it if you don't want to. Don't have to do that. Just place it underneath it. And it's a really pretty way to display your Sweet Pea project that you downloaded and stitched out. So, I just want to thank you for tuning in, and this was a fun project for me. I really liked using the Sweet Pea project. They're well written as well, so I don't think you'll have any problem understanding them. I know Sweet Pea sometimes will do a video on some of their projects that they have on their website as well. So definitely take a peek at some of those as well if you need a little bit extra help on it. I also I'm going to just put this up here for a second. I also stitched out this project, the clutch. They have like 4 different sizes that you can stitch them out as, and these are great too. I know my girls have each got one of these, and they absolutely loved them. And of course, fabric choices, everything is up to you. I mean, but your fabric choices are really what makes a project, and of course your designs are included. And same way with this project as well. The projects are really well written out, and explained to the fullest, so that you should not have any problems with following them. So I just want to say, it's been fun, and it's like until the next video. We'll see you then. Okay, bye.